and Ahmad Al Hamamsi from Middle East. Our global S&OP community podcast mission is to build a global community from supply chain, marketing, trade marketing, sales and finance all over the world, where everyone's voice could be heard and listened. Every week, we host a new episode with great thought leader in the S&OP industry. We believe that one word, one story, or one conversation could open up the light in the screen of your consciousness and you'll never be the same again. We discuss hot and trending topics with our subject matter experts by asking the right questions that uncover their valuable experience in our show. You can visit our website ahmedkhaled.co. Stay tuned every week with our global S&OP community podcast.
Hello, and welcome everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from. This is your global S&OP community podcast, and of course, we're building a global community of not only experts from supply chain, but from marketing, from trade marketing, from sales, from finance, from all aspects of business where your voice would be heard. And of course, we are interviewing subject matter experts, and we are trying here to building values from our subject matter experts, of course, who are sharing a lot of values with our beautiful, lovely audience. Please tell us, where are you tuning in from, and where are you joining from which part of the world. And we are today so happy to have you all. And Ahmed, my friend, will introduce our guest and subject today.
Thank you,
Hi, Ahmed.
Hamamsi.
How are you?
Thank you so much, Hamamsi, for everything, and hope also everything is well at your end and also at our audience end. And today we are going to talk about one of the most, I say, like common struggles inside a business. And our topic today will be around how to set an effective process thinking inside your business. And many questions could come into your mind in that time or in that way. Have you ever just wondered how to measure the efficiency of a business process? I think this question is not easy one. And what could be the gaps inside the process and how can you control them? And from which perspective you can control them? How to manage even the most best even assets inside the process itself, which is people, how to manage their behavior while executing a new process. And this also related to a change management in case. And
Yes.
could be a question like how to make sure that this process is sustainable. And this is it's not easy one. How to make this process sustainable, because I can make a process just moving like 1 month, 2 months, and then it will be off. How to make it sustainable, and what are the
Yes.
parameters that you should put inside to make that it's sustainable after you leave.
Yeah.
More and more of those questions, beside definitely your questions today, will be answered by our global thought leader today. And our thought leader today is Dr. Arpan Dev. And let me introduce Arpan. Arpan is the global process manager at Unilever. He has more than almost 12 years of experience in business consultancy and managing people. His experience in business analysis and the process setting is really remarkable. I would say panic and frustration are not defined in his dictionary at all. When it comes to executing or solving a problems or solving a conflict, I would say he enjoyed this solving the conflicts and the problems that are not easy to be solved. I still remember his mantra is don't chase perfection, but rather chase progress. When it comes to business, he puts always people first as he believes that people are the most asset for any company. Definitely, without further due introduction, may I ask you please to welcome with us our great thought leader today, Dr. Arpan Dev. And before just introducing him, as usual, let's give him the great applause. Hello,
Wow.
Arpan.
Hello,
Thank you
hello
so
Arpan, how are
much.
you
Thank you
doing?
so much. I'm good. I'm good. Thank you so much. How are you guys?
We're
Everything is
doing
good, thank
fine.
you. It's a pleasure having you today, and I believe that it will be a very unique values that we received. As we said, that it's always a knowledge that you never find in books, which is something very unique today. Glad to have you today, Arpan.
Glad to be here. It's an absolute pleasure. I know I love the work you guys are doing. I've been following you guys for a long time, and those are
Thank you
tall
so
words. I
much.
just hope I can live up to some of those. And I'm so happy to be here. And the next few minutes, an hour, what I would like to do is think from your lens what is it that I could share with you. I don't bring in a lot of how to put this. You put a huge building in front of me to climb over, but I'll try to answer to the best of my abilities, and hopefully I'll stand according to what you have said. So happy to
Definitely.
be here. Really happy.
Thank you so
Thank you
much,
so
Arpan.
much. Thank you so much. I think, Ahmed, let's take first some of our beautiful audience
Sure,
started to come. Noha
sure.
Labib, love it.
We have
Thank you, Noha, for joining
thank
us.
thank you so much for tuning in, Noha.
And we
Our
have
friend
Muhammad
Muhammad Muslim Uddin
from
from
Bangladesh.
Bangladesh.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you for
much for
joining
tuning
us.
in. Our friend Omar
Uh,
Ismail,
we
London.
have a question already. Wow. Thank you, Omar Ismail, for joining. So I
Thank you so
think we
much. I
will
think
start with it, but
we,
let's take
yes,
greetings and we will start with this one.
definitely.
So thank you, Omar.
Def-
Definitely on. I think it's a good one.
Thank you so
So
much. We'll definitely
yeah,
will
thank
come
you.
and start with
Yeah, we'll
this.
come back to it. Yeah,
Thank you so much. Our
Mitchell.
lovely friend Mitchell, Dubai,
Thank you,
UAE. Thank
Mitchell.
you so much
Thank
for
you.
tuning in. Our great friend Juliet, like this
Hi,
process
Juliet.
thinking
Thank you for
university.
joining.
Thank you so much. Our friend, usually, our friend Ghada
Ghada
Salam.
Salam.
Why we
Uh,
can't see your live show, only sound? I think if you guys you can see us and watch us,
yes, please
please,
say
please
yes.
confirm.
Yeah, please
Please.
confirm if you can see us.
Yes. Thank you so much, Ghada.
Thank
And
you,
please
Ghada,
confirm
for
also.
joining.
Thank you. Our friend Dr. Asma Guru. Thank
Thank you,
you so
Doctor.
much for
Thank you.
tuning
Thank you for
in from
joining.
India. Thank
Thank you.
you
Thank you
for
so
tuning in from
much.
India. Grateful. Thank you. Our friend Juliet, again, spot on. Don't chase perfection, chase progress. Thank you so
Yes,
much.
thank you.
Rosie,
Rosie
all the best.
Alam,
Thank you so
thank
much
you.
for tuning in. And as usual, our friend,
My friend Diana, Diana from Ireland. Yeah, thank you so much. Friend of
uh,
our show. Thank you so much,
definitely.
Diana.
Thank you so much, Diana. Uh, just guys, feel free again to ask whatever question into your mind with our great thought leader today. Definitely, we'll try to jump into those questions for the sake of time. If you allow me, I'll park the first question from I think was Omar. We can take
Yeah,
it to the second one, but
yes.
let me start the first question that we have just on the preparation of the episode today to our lovely, great thought leader today, Dr. Arpan. So, Dr. Arpan, so what are the essential elements I would say we should take it or look at it when it comes to assessing the efficiency of a process?
That's an interesting one. And let me perhaps take an example to try and answer that. The word process is rather difficult to explain if you take one of those more complicated ones. So I'll take a very very simple one, and I take this example from one of the videos that I watched on YouTube, a very simple one. Imagine yourself rolling a dice, right? You have six faces with six numbers, and imagine you have now not one but 10 dice on your hands, right? And um, you want to roll the dice, and that's your input variable. And what you want to do is on the other side, the sum total of what you get on the faces, you want to count those, you want to sum those up, and you want to store that, right? And that's your output. You want to have a sum of a number. And whatever transformation goes in the middle, you're rolling it, it's standing still on the table. Uh, think of it as a small transformation. It's a simple process, right? You roll a dice, you get a number, you sum it up, you set it out as an output. Now, tell me, the chances of you getting a 1 on all of those 10 dice, it's extremely rare, right? The chances of you ending up with a 10, which is the extreme rare, and similarly the chances of you ending up with a 60, which is 6 on all 10, it's even it's extremely rare as well. So almost like luck, right? Most probably when you do this process over and over and over again, most often than not, you will end up being somewhere in the central zone, right? You will end up with somewhere in the range of 25 to 45, 50. That's a more convincing answer. Now, let's say you roll the dice and the first score you get is 25. You roll again, you sum it up, you get another 45. And you want to chart it out. Yeah, on your left axis, you have the numbers, the counts, the sum. On your right axis, you have the occasions. And you swing between 10 and 60. And you got these two numbers, 25 and 45. It's a huge swing. It's a swing of 25 points. And you go thinking, why that wild variation? Yeah, and what really caused it? It cannot be one dice, because the highest sum that a dice can give you is 6. It cannot be two dice. That'll give you 12 at best, right? So the actual permutation combination of you getting that variation of 25 to 45, it's not controlled by one single variable, but it's a interplay of multiple variables. This is often what we call in business language or in process language as chaos, right? And what you lack here is you don't have control. If you really want to ask me in a single word, what's the most essential element of finding whether a process is efficient or whether a process is even a good process, is whether or not you have control. And all the world-class strategies, they talk about it in one way or the other. The Toyota Production System, or TPS, it relies on two concepts called ZDOKA, which loosely means automation with human touch, and in just in time, both of which are about control. You're controlling the variables, right? You're automating it, but anytime someone makes an error, you have a human being coming in and taking a look. Same with just in time. You want the material to arrive just about in time when you need it. So you're controlling the inputs, right?
Yes.
Pokioke, the next Japanese concept, it's about mistake proofing. You're trying to make it so simple and foolproof that you can't make a mistake. Six Sigma, Lean Six Sigma, the 5 principles, one of the main principles, the ending principle of the whole process is about control. The DMAC framework, it ends with control. So the one element which is the most important in understanding whether or not a process works, whether or not a process is a good process, let alone efficient, is control. Yeah, that's how I look at it.
That's great. That's great definition. I like it a lot. Actually, yes, control
I
is very
think
important.
I think control. It's not easy to have it if you don't understand the process itself, because most people, they got annihilated inside the process itself. They try to control things that they don't understand. As you said, setting the control points, it's one of the most essential, and it's not easy one, because most people, when they go, I believe that most people, every one of us has random thinking, different thinking, I would say. And when it comes to set the control itself, it will vary from from a people to another themselves. Depends on understanding of the process itself, or the capability of their understanding of the process itself. So as you said, and as you mentioned, Arpan, control is one of the things that we should control any process. At the end of the day, we have to understand the full process. What are the variables, as you mentioned, like the dice itself? If I have 6 It will be totally different when I have five, when I have four, because the total output will be totally different and the probability will be totally different. So understanding and setting the controls, it's not an easy, I would say, task itself. But what I can see from real experience also, most people they start to blame the process. When you do any process, start to blame the process and start to blame the inputs, to start to
Exactly.
blame the outputs itself, rather than just blaming themselves and give themselves to understand how they can control the process, how they can give a clarity and just a quality time to
Mostly,
understand it.
exactly. Mostly the problem is they don't give the process time to work, and they start to blame maybe people that things are not working, or they are not measuring, they are not giving enough time to measure a new process. So I think, yeah, all these points will go through, but definitely that's a great definition, Arpan, and a great example to elaborate on this question.
Thank you,
Ahmed, what do you
Arpan.
think? We should take the question from our
Definitely,
audience. Yeah.
Dr. Omar Ismail. So he's from London. He's asking, who do you believe is responsible for mastering the process of your business thinking?
Mhm.
It's a good
Interesting one.
question.
Let me take a little bit of a digress to answer that, or at least attempt to answer that, Omar. Um, there generally, when you look around this topic, when you poke around hard enough, you'll find two very linked topics. One says about process thinking, the other about system thinking, and it's easy to use them interchangeably time to time, but they do have their own merits, but they both also have a slightly different objective. And I want to take this as an example to try and uh, get this answer for you. Um, if you think about this whole topic of process thinking, a process by definition ignores the past and the future. It is intentional almost. You want to think about the present event. And that's important. And that's important because it allows people to take small incremental changes or improvements right that moment, right? Um, suppose you take this example of, let's say you're driving a car, right? And you usually, while driving a car, you change your lanes, right? You change your lanes. That's not a good habit, right? And in reality, if you think about it, all you need to do is try to follow the lane. And it's not that difficult, right? You have markings on the road. All you have to do is just follow the lane. So you can make a small improvement, a very, very minute improvement. And the rule of 1% or the rule of compounding makes it so important and efficient over the long run. You make those small changes, and over the period of time, it ends up being a very, very big difference. And the most important part of any process thinking is it's replicable, right? Um, imagine yourself winning a lottery, right? You got a 1 million bucks. Happy, lucky, elated. Can you do it again? What are the chances,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
can't. I mean, unless you are the luckiest man on the
Very
planet.
lucky.
I mean,
Yes.
then I'm gonna come knocking at your door and say hi, hello, teach me the luck as well. But it's unlikely, right? But
Yes.
take on the other end, if you were to study let's say the stock market, and you understood how to read the fundamentals of a company, you understood how to really understand the stock movements, the different ratios of the company, you could over a period of time predict where the stock movements would be, and maybe you know how to make $25,000 instead of a 1 million, $25,000, right?
Yeah.
But that's fine. You can replicate it because you know now the process, and you can replicate it over and over and over again. You can make 1 million and 2 millions and 3 millions. So it's replicable. So those small improvements that you made that allows you to make a very big change. Now, come to the other side, which is system thinking. Why is it so different from process thinking? If process is so brilliant, you can replicate it, and in the present you're making a change. Why do you really think about system thinking? The importance of system thinking comes when you try to bring some of these processes interplaying with each other, right? When was the last time you took a bus, right? You would have noticed, you have a bus which takes you from one place, drops you another location, and in your mind, it's a simple process, it's a simple structure, it's a simple setup. But in reality, to make that happen, there's a lot more which is going in the background. There is a
Mm-hmm.
ticketing sales system, there is an upkeep and repair of the vehicle, there is a safety measures, payrolls of the people. And each of these are different processes which come together to make a system. Now,
Yeah.
oftentimes, now to get to your answer finally, sorry to take such a long time. Oftentimes what would you notice in an organization, the slightly strategic leaders, they are more responsible for setting the system thinking about how different
Yeah.
parts of the organizations come together, gel together to form one brilliant
Mm-hmm.
piece of value. Because you see, one of the most important part um, of a system is that it has a purpose, and second, that it creates value, right? um,
Yeah.
so slightly higher leadership, it's their job to create the system thinking. But within
Mm-hmm.
that group, the middle management and everyone for that matter is responsible for putting the process thinking in it. Maybe not the shop floor person by default, but maybe
Mm.
someone higher up slightly to say, this is how you're supposed to do it, right? This is that you are supposed to follow a lane to make sure that you don't get injured, because there can be things falling off from over your head, or that you have to every time the light goes red, you have to switch off the molding machine, right? So who's responsible? It, I mean, everyone is, but in general, what you would notice in an organization is that slightly senior people are responsible for setting the system together, whereas the middle management is generally responsible for setting the process together, for making sure that the process work, and that each of these individual processes, they come together to create the value and the purpose that you want to serve. I hope I was able to give you some nuggets
Lovely.
of what you were looking for.
Yes.
Oh, brilliant.
Thank you so much. No, no, it is. It is. It's. I think it was to the point. This will leave us with something. If you allow me, you spoke about the system thinking and the process thinking. What could be the difference between the process thinking and the system thinking, based on your experience also?
Again, I'll take the same example, Khalid, if I may, which is,
Yeah.
Sure.
actually, let me ask you, when was the last time you actually took a bus? Just think about the system for a second. You took a bus of late?
I took the shuttle bus maybe today.
You did? Okay.
Inside,
And
yes.
and this whole setup, what would you call it? Would you call it a process, or ignore everything that I said just now, but
Hmm.
without that, would you call it a process? Would you call it a system? Would you call it a setup? What would you call it?
I think it's more into system little bit. I can
Yeah,
see it
yeah,
from my experience. Yeah.
yeah. That's rightly put. And
Mm,
um, they both have their merits, because the ideal part of a system, what a system generally is, it's a group or combination of things that kind of come
mm,
together, and it forms a unitary whole, if you like, right? The whole transportation
mm,
setup of picking up people from one location, dropping them to other location, that's the whole setup. And
mhm,
like I said, there are two important concepts of a system. A system has purpose. In this instance, the purpose is to move people from one destination to another. A system creates value, and in this case, maybe it creates an economical transportation mode, right? Because not everyone
Yeah.
can
mhm,
afford an Uber or can own a car. It
Yes.
may be that one can imagine that it can reduce the pollution, because there are lesser vehicles on the road if everyone were to take a public transportation, and that's creating values. But the system cannot work if any of the processes which come together to make the system fails. For
mm,
example, if you were to not pay the salaries of the drivers or the people, the
mhm,
conductor who gives you the ticket, they will not work, and if they
Yeah.
don't work, the system will fail. So
mm,
to really ask which one is a better one is slightly difficult to answer, to be honest. It's almost like a chicken and egg. But remember this: a process is a sequence of activities, and they
mm,
have a single output in mind, right? They always want to go to one single output. I would go as far as to say that a process is about how to achieve a goal, whereas a
mhm,
system is about how do you bring all of this house to achieve those certain goals to get a much bigger goal. um and I said just some time back, it's almost the 1% effect. um if I can give you an example again, you've all heard about the Amazon forest, right? It's
yes.
huge. There
Mm.
are 16,000 species of plants discovered so far in the Amazon. 16,000. That's a big number, right?
Yeah.
And
Mm,
that's just how much we know about it. What you would find interesting, that most of the forest, close to
Mm.
85%, 90% of the forest of these plants over the entire Amazon jungle are um, dedicated by 227 species, 16,000 species overall, but 227,000 species who actually make up bulk of the jungle. How can that be? And it's this 1% effect. It's almost like if you can imagine two trees growing together one by one, side by side. Each day one competes with the other to grow just an inch taller so that it can get the better share of sunlight and some better rain, and this keeps going up and up and up. And this process of compounding each day slightly little bit is what allowed it to then spread its seeds across the entire forest. So um, really, to ask which one is a better, uh, or which comes first, it's really difficult to say. I'll just stop by saying that they both need each other, and it is okay to sometimes think of them interchangeably, as long as you are clear what you want to achieve. And sometimes you can achieve it by something as simple as rolling a dice. Sometimes it could be much more complex, and you need more than one processes, and I'd be happy to call it a system if they all work in conjunction.
Hamamsi, if you allow me, huh?
Yes,
If you,
please.
Thank you for the elaboration. Because I listened too much about system and the process thinking, and I got confusion because I thought that the two are the same mostly. But when you give this example that the process itself you could have many processes inside the system itself. So just the process of payroll, the process of moving people, the process of doing something inside the system. But the system is, as you said, that it's something related to the values itself, how you can look at it at a higher level, which is something very unique.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you so much.
Great, great.
Thank you.
And also elaborating with examples were great, Arpan. So if we go to the second like component, which is people, how to make sure that people will follow the process and that it is sustainable from your point of view, because this is very important. You could have a great process, a great system, but it doesn't work because people are not willing to do
Yeah. People often say, and I think Ahmed, you also said this in your
it.
introduction, that people are the greatest assets. If I can
Yes.
elaborate a little more about that, yeah. I think there is a second layer to it, a more important layer to it. Of course, people are the most important asset, and it's easy to just say that one line, right? It's
Yeah.
my biggest asset in Unilever are the people. Of course, we are, but more important than that, it's not just the people, it's the culture that you set within these
Yes.
people, the interaction of the
Yes.
people. That is the real asset, right? Imagine you have
True.
the best of the minds in the world, yeah, like NASA's of the world, right? And if they were to work in silos, um,
Yeah.
it wouldn't give you the kind of value that you want to. But
True.
anyway, just to get back to your question, how do you make sure that it's sustained? How do you make sure that people follow it? I personally think that it's a little bit about predictability. It's a little bit about making sure that people understand and can predict what's happening. No one loves the unknown. Everyone is scared of it. I mean, no matter how much someone goes and says, I go with the flow and I'm up for any challenge. Maybe they are young, and they want to do a few adventures. That's all right. But in reality, the unknown scares everyone.
Yeah.
Take this entire conversation, right? I'm pretty sure both of you have an alternate power backup instead in case the power goes off. You have a second laptop and a mic ready in case this goes up. You're trying to predict this whole thing. I don't, by the way, but I have my phone.
Neither.
I have my phone.
Yes,
Um,
me too.
but the idea is you're trying to predict this whole situation,
Yes.
right? And we love predictability, and that's how you want to sustain it. And what's even more important is, see, once you have predicted it, you get into a routine of it. Your subconscious takes over, and you're no longer thinking about it consciously. When you go into the bathroom for your morning brush, you don't really think, I have to squeeze 1 ounce of toothpaste on my brush. You just know it, right? Because you've been doing it over and over for the last 30, 35 years. And um, that becomes a habit. And the power of habit is that if you if you really want to control a habit, if you really want to change a habit, you can't do it fast. But if you do it slow enough, you can achieve big things. And again, I love examples, so I'm going to take one more.
Yeah.
Khalid, you look like someone who hits the gym quite often, right? Is it fair to say? Do you work
Sure,
out?
definitely,
Yeah. What's
definitely,
your
yes,
favorite?
yes.
What's your favorite? What do you do? What kind of ways do you pull?
Like I like many things
Dumbbells.
actually. I
Okay,
like many.
dumbbells.
I like for sure biceps definitely. I
Okay,
like playing by bars. I
okay,
like playing
okay,
also in inclination. So I have
okay,
many
okay.
things.
So let's I'm gonna take a wild guess. Okay, so you said dumbbells. Let's say you pick up what you generally do, 15 kgs, 20 kgs. Is it in the ballpark?
More,
Right?
more, more.
Let's more. Okay, okay, 30 kgs. Let's go with 30. So you do 30 kgs every day. Let's assume. Okay, you really do a couple of reps of 30 kgs, and you keep going at it every day. Now imagine that you want to pump up more. You want to gain more muscles on your biceps, right? And you think you could either do one of the two things. You could either pick up more weight, or you could do more repetitions, right? Now imagine
True.
you do 30s, but you suddenly one day go and say, I want to make up more of my biceps and I want to pick up 60, like the absolute double. What would happen the next day? You would end up with
Screwing,
an
I
injury.
believe.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
cannot work it out at
exactly.
all.
So what you have done is you have introduced a huge change to your body. You see,
Yeah.
the rapid change is in constant contradiction with equilibrium. Our natural tendency is to
I
be in
get it.
equilibrium. If you're seated, you want to be just peaceful. If you're sleeping, you want to be peaceful. You get a standard equilibrium. Your body and mind has set up into that habit, and you want to sustain that. The moment you say that you're going to move from 30 to 60 kgs, your body rebels because you are introducing too fast a change in
Yeah.
your system. And on the other hand, let's say you pick up, you know, a 10% extra every day. You go from 30 to 32, and 33 and 37 and 38 and 40 and 50, and finally you hit 60. What you have done is you have incrementally introduced the change, and your body over a period of time had gotten used to this new weight, right? And over a period of time, it's started to say, okay, I can do it. I can
Normal.
do a little more. So to go back to your question, the 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 two things that you need to, in my mind, okay, and I'm pretty sure there are different opinions about this around the world, but in my mind, the two ways to introduce change and sustain a process, especially when there are people involved, not machines alone, is you got to introduce change slowly, and you're going to make it predictable. You cannot keep changing too fast, because then you're just going to break the system, just like you will break your body if you were to
Yeah.
suddenly go to 60 and then to 80. In fact, if you go from 60 to 20 back, even that's a problem, right? So you got to do it slowly, and you're going to do it continuously, but you're going to make it predictable, and that's important. The moment you do this, I think over a period of time, people build it into a habit, and then you can sustain it. It's just the culture you're trying to build, right? You're saying, I'm going to
Very.
introduce change, but I'm going to introduce it slowly, and that's the culture of the organization. And that's what the power of an organization is. It's not the people alone, it's the culture that you're setting into the
Brilliant.
organization slowly.
100%. 100%.
Brilliant.
If you
Brilliant.
allow me, if you allow me again,
Oh,
if you allow me
it
again.
deserves.
I
I
think,
think,
Arpan,
yeah.
you go ahead, Hamamsi.
Yeah, I think he touched on a very important subject, because we say people, and he's right. It's not only people; it's the communication. It's between people. It's the culture that you give to people, the freedom that you give the people to to say their opinion or something, or to and exactly introduce change, but not very rapid, because they fear. People are will fear afraid of this change, and they will suddenly the process will fail if you introduce change very quickly. And I love how he explains everything with the example and of the body and all that. That's really good and understandable, I think, for all, hopefully for all our audience, because it's a really great way to explain it. Thank you,
Yes.
Arpan.
Thank you, Arpan. And let me also re-stress on what Arpan has already mentioned it, which is why most processes just fail because of the hard
Yes,
transition, especially
yes,
when it comes to change management. Hard transition, you need to take it on high speed, as Arpan said. you can move from X into 10X, 30X. But people, they will not be able to cater for this. You have to understand the behaviors. As Urban said, that you have habits and you cannot change these habits and this usual work on day or night or just on a moment like this. It takes time. So you have to give yourself a time to understand people, to understand their requirements, their challenges, solve their challenges. As we spoke at the beginning, that if you factor the people into your process, we are going to tell you that 99% from the process will be sustainable if you take the voice of people into your process building and controlling it. But just moving it from just harder transition will never serve the business at any point of time, definitely.
This I'll go back to the culture, of course, because some managers or top managers do that because they are not. They think they are not staying for a long time, so they want to do a rapid change in the organization. Then they want to get, for example, a change. They want to get a certain level of profitability, and that's why they are pressuring, pushing people, pushing change
Right.
quickly. And at the end, most of the cases, from my
Mistaken.
experience, I've seen failure. Of trying to introduce a rapid change in the process or rapid change in the organization. Definitely.
100%. If we can come back to our audience, send some greetings.
Yes. Yes,
Definitely. Yeah, we
please.
have our LinkedIn user. Hi
Hi
from
from
Cairo.
Cairo. Hello.
Thank you
Thank you
so
for
much.
joining.
Thank you. Our friend
Baba Sab Patil
Baba
from
Sab
India.
from
Thank you.
India.
Thank you
Thank
for
you so
joining
much.
us.
Our friend Shamsuddin, good session.
Thank you for
Thank you
joining,
so much.
Shams.
For our also friend Denrish.
Dendrix
Great.
Dondrish Sananda. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for
Thank
joining.
you so much. He's saying also that great topic, big believer in process and critical thinking.
Thank
Just
you,
thank you
Dondrish.
so much. Our friend Saifullah, great. Thank you so much for tuning
Thank
in
you
as
for
well.
tuning in.
Our friend Omar Ismail, he's just answering the question from Arpan. The answer makes total sense. Thank you so much for answering the question. Thank you,
Thank
Omar,
you,
for
Omar,
tuning
for
in.
the
Thank you,
question.
Arpan. Thank you also. Our friend Juliet, love how you broke it down with the bus journey. Will think of my next bus a bit differently when I'm on your process assistant. I think, yeah, that's why the impact that will leave in people, it's amazing. Thank you
Thank you,
so much,
Juliet.
Juliet. Thank you. So she's giving a huge applause. Thank you so much. Definitely. We have our friend JB. Hey, hey, thank you so much for tuning in.
Hi, JP.
Our friend Cecilia, good
Cecilia
evening
from
from
Nigeria.
Nigeria.
Thank
Thank
you,
you so much.
Cecilia, for joining.
Last but not least, Juliet, she's saying the culture, inclusion, and the freedom you give people, such meaningful and relatable examples. Thank you
Thank you,
so much,
Juliet, for
guys. Feel
your lovely
free.
comments.
Thank
Feel
you so
free
much.
to ask any more questions, our lovely audience, of course, and with our great subject matter expert, Arpan. So,
Yes.
yeah,
So,
Ahmed,
Urban,
come on,
just
yeah.
if you allow me, I'll ask you these questions. So, are you saying that not only process can be made predictable?
Um, Not everything, but quite a lot. Quite a lot.
Yeah.
Almost 80-20 is the rule you follow there. 80% at the very least. And of course, I mean, unless you think of going to a casino and gambling as a process, that's very difficult to, unless you're a card reader. But then
Like,
essentially, I think a large part of it is, and again, it's 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 how the nature is balanced. Quite a few things in nature, they like to go back to their balance. And I mentioned earlier about the state of equilibrium and the state of
Yeah.
mm,
natural identity. You cannot, uh, and it's not just human, by the way, huh? Anything for that matter, you cannot move away from your natural identity. If
mm,
you're a person who is gregarious in nature, no matter how much you try, you will end up being there again. If you, on the other hand, are a bit of an introvert, you don't like, big parties. No matter what you do, even if you throw in the middle of a party, you will possibly find one of those sweet corners and get your mojito and be yourself. So
Yeah.
predictability is everywhere. In fact, the famous 80-20 rule, that the Pareto principle,
Yeah.
it was designed by an Italian economist named Vilfredo Pareto, and he
Yeah.
was not so famous until he made this one small observation. One fine day, this gentleman, he was harvesting the peas from his garden. Yeah, just a very small activity, right? So he's harvesting all the peas from his garden, and he notices that a large part of his peas come from a very few of his pods. And when he really calculated it, he noticed that it's almost like an 80-20. 80% of his peas are coming from 20% of the pods. And that got him
Yeah.
thinking, why is it that? I mean, if it can happen in nature, and he being an economist, can it happen elsewhere? So he went about in search of what is the wealth distribution for Italy. He was an Italian, and he went about to find that, interestingly enough, 80% of the land in Italy back then was owned by 20% of the wealthy people.
Mm.
And then he said, why don't I take this elsewhere? Let's try to go anywhere else and see if this principle holds true. He did this for UK, and he got all the tax records, and just a matter of time before he came back with a slightly similar conclusion. It was, I think, 85-15 when he went and checked
Yeah.
UK. So I guess, even bigger upper strata, but it gets around the same. If you think
Ratio.
of
Yeah.
this an average, it's around the same band. So um, it's interesting that almost everything in nature finds its balance and predictability, at least 80% of it. And again, if you take the dice example, um, the dice, they are not predictable, and hence they are called chaos. Of course, you have examples like them in our nature as well, but there are also ways to control them and make them predictable. Now take the same example and extend it a little further. I said you had 10 dice, and you're rolling them again. Just for people who have just tuned in, the same example, you have a set of 10 dice, each ranging from 1 to 6 on all of its faces, and you roll them twice, and you count the scores. You can get a score between 10, which is 1 on each of the dice, or 60, which is 6 on all the 10 dice, right? So you can have that range. Now, this is not predictable. When you roll it, you have no way to predict what's the outcome. But now replace 4 or 5 of these dice with a different set of dice. 4 dice out, 4 other dice in. But on these dice, 3 of these dice, they have only the number 1 on all of the 6 faces.
Yeah.
And one of the dice has either 1 or a 2 on all of the 6 faces. Okay. So now you have brought in a little bit of predictability in the system, because now
Yeah.
you can no longer go in a wild swing. And every time you have a wild swing, let's say, again, taking the same example, 45, you have a first round of throw, you got a score of 25. The second round of throw, you got a
60.
score of, let's say, 30. You can't get 60 or 45 anymore because you have
Yeah.
replaced 4 of your dice. But now you know where to look, because all those 4 dice, they can only give you a score of 1. So the important variables are the ones which gave you 6. So now suddenly you have brought in predictability. Now you know that your swings are going to be much less wilder. And suddenly, if you think of it as a bell curve and a normal distribution,
Distribution.
your extremes have shifted and your average has gotten somewhere else, and you now have a slightly thinner band to look for what there normally was. And 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 that's how you got in predictability. So while it may not be very nature predictable, not everything, but you can bring in predictability by following SOPs, hard standards, all the principles like lean and TPS systems. They are all about predictability. They are trying to control the system by bringing in that amount of predictability. And the DMake framework is it does a brilliant job by doing so. And what you're actually trying to see is, if I have a problem, if I have control over the system, how can I analyze? How can I do a root cause? You no longer have to worry about all the permutations and combinations of those 60, the 10 dice, but
Points.
you now only have to worry about the 6 dice. So
Yeah.
yeah, to your point, yes, it is possible to a larger extent to bring predictability in the system, but of course there will always be some unpredictable behavior. I mean, human beings can be unpredictable, right? That's almost impossible to always predict them. um, Nature can be unpredictable. The COVID instance, for example, was an extreme
Exactly.
anomaly. But the other thing that you need to do is um, plan for these unpredictabilities. I mean, most of the, um, I mean, not everything, but to some extent, most of these these last 2 years, you would notice that the e-com sales for most of the FMCG companies have
Boomed.
quadrupled,
Yeah.
tripled,
Yeah.
quadrupled, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
companies which had been investing in this space, they obviously did better than those who did not. So could you have predicted COVID? Absolutely not, impossible. But could you have done some preparation for a disaster to some extent? Perhaps, perhaps. There
Yeah.
are companies which have done better than others in
Resilience.
this yeah, resilience.
Yes. Thank you,
Definitely,
Arpan.
definitely. Thank you, Arpan, for this input. And always we say yes, like you said, and then that contingency plans and all that companies should take it seriously, and it's not like something you put in the shelf or in the drawer, or don't give it attention, especially after what happened. So yes, I like the answer, of course, and try to people try to then go back to equilibrium, and we try to make things predictable for us, of course, definitely.
And for
So
sure, there will
yeah,
be, I would say, limit, as mentioned by Arpan. There will be a limit of unpredictability, definitely, because we, at the end of the day, we are living in a VUCA world with full of volatility, uncertainty, ambiguity, and I would say everything. You have to be resilient. If there is anything that is unpredictable, you have to be very resilient in that time. How you can find a way to move the wheel again, because if
yes,
if your process is, you think that it will work 100% effective, it doesn't make sense. As we said, that practicality, it's totally different than theories. When it comes to the
exactly,
ground itself, there are many
exactly,
variables. There are many variables, and with the competition that we have and uncertainty that we have, you have to be very responsive, and you have to be very resilient enough to respond to all of these disruptions that happen on a daily basis or momently basis with this environment that we live on. So I echo your voice, Ahmad and Arpan, on that point
yeah,
that we
yeah.
shared.
This is actually, it reminds me of an example about also this predictability, and I remember also that like when I started also, and it was a surprise for me. One of top management, they're telling me predictability and get the forecast to 95 to 100, while we have 1,000 SKUs, and this is the degree of the value 17, 18 markets. So it it is like impossible. This is what we are talking about. So again,
Believe me, I know that
it will
pain.
go back to 80 to the 80-20 rule. So my answer was 80-20. Let's focus on the 80-20 and try to get this this percentage that you want us to get. Yeah.
This is
So
thank you.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, this will take us also to the next question, Arpan. We are talking about real world-based situation where you faced with sometimes with an idea or something that you hadn't considered before, and how do you react to this, and what did you do? Like, do you take it into consideration, or tell us from your experience?
There have been many, to be honest, but let's pick up something recently. I mean, I was reading this book by Adam Grant. It says "Think Again."
Yeah.
Brilliant book, and he speaks about this joy of being wrong in one of his chapters. And I didn't understand this before. I mean, how when I first read it, I didn't understand how can you be happy about being wrong. But then there is almost a beautiful nuance in it. It's almost poetry. If you anyone who has heard about this whole Johari window, right? You have this one small box of yourself where you don't know what you don't know, and that's also often called the black box. And the the if you say knowledge is power, I think there was a quote I read some time back. If knowledge is power, knowing what you don't know is wisdom, right? If you can just shorten that small black box of your, it's wisdom. So I'll go back to one example that you requested for. So this was not so long back, still fresh in my memory. Me and one of my colleagues, we were working on this side project. Let's call it a side project back then, because I was doing something else, and we were trying to try our hands on machine learning and AI to create a superior forecast. And since you speak about forecast in your previous mention,
Yes.
it kind of jogged that memory. So we're trying to create a superior forecast, and it was exciting. It was still new world for me. The early results were very promising. So obviously we had exciting people,
Hype.
excited bosses, and you had all the support. I had all the support that I wanted. Yeah, and all I cared about was creating a forecast which is better than my current forecast. Get a forecast
Yeah.
which is lesser prone to error. Get a forecast which proves that your forecast accuracy, if you like, or your
Yeah.
biases are within the acceptable range. Accuracy is higher, bias is lower, and we got it. The early experiments were tremendous. Very happy. I still remember my first POC, brilliant colors, and everyone was so excited. And then this was all POC, right? Sandbox. Think of it as sandbox. And then
Yeah.
I take it to a real life user. I say, excuse me, this is how you have been forecasting. This is your accuracy, but look at mine. Yeah, I got a number which is driven by machine. I took all of your inputs and brilliant output. Tomorrow we'll start switching over. And this guy goes, okay, I see the merit in that. Absolutely. In fact, it gives me better bonus. Why not? But can you explain me how you got to it? And I said, using machine learning. Okay, that's fine. But explain me what went into it. What were the variables? What were the inputs? And I was annoyed. I'll be very, very honest. I was annoyed because I said, I'm giving you a forecast which has proven to be superior. I've given you a forecast where you don't have to toil around looking at 100 different reports to create a number. I'm giving you a forecast which you accepted is going to get you a better bonus. Why do you care? And what I did not realize is, again, the whole predictability. People are scared of what they don't understand, and and
Mhm.
and it's important. And if you, there was recent quote by I think an American engineer, and Edward Deming, if I'm not wrong, and he said, if you can't explain what you are doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
it's important, because the moment you think of it that way, you're going back to the whole system of values and predictability, because then it means that just because I got lucky in one POC doesn't necessarily mean that I can replicate it elsewhere. And that got
Yeah.
me thinking, this guy did have some
Understandable.
merit. So one of my colleagues, she goes, and still good friends, great friends, she explains to me that I've done this myself as a planner for so many years, and I would love to have some nuance of predictability. I want to understand what you got into it, right? And since then, boy, was I wrong. And the joy, I now sitting today after reading that book and that one line, the
Mhm.
joy of being wrong, and when I think back about that lesson, it was so profound that um I had to change my whole thinking. I had to think about no
Mhm.
longer better forecast accuracy, but more about how do I explain it to forecast, and explain the
Yeah.
forecast to someone. And today, I am one of the strongest protagonists of this topic in my organization. I keep pushing people to say, can you explain to me this number? If you can't explain to me this number, how do you expect me to take it?
Yeah.
Best case scenario, you get the number right, and
100%.
then I actually have no job, right? If I'm a planner. Worst case, you get the number wrong, and I have no job because someone screwed up. So, um, so that's one profound example. The joy of being wrong there was infallible. I still carry that lesson. There were many more, but this one just sticks out like a sore thumb every time. But
Yes.
just
I
to
th- I think it takes a very mature self awareness to go to that level, Arpan, because again, the human nature. It, I wouldn't say that we will never admit that we are wrong, but it takes a courage that to say that I have something here I need to change, because at the end of the day I need to serve others. This is it's not easy one. It takes a lot of self awareness and self courage just to say it. And as you said that, from that point I think it changed something. Definitely it changed something in your the way that you think, the way that you perceive with people, the way that you talk with people, because you want to serve them more. It's not about just machine learning. It's not about only artificial intelligence. It's not only about the output, but it's about how you can serve people and help them understanding and change, impact them. It's not easy one. That's why. Yes, definitely. Thank you for sharing this,
Definitely,
Arpan.
yes. Thank you for sharing this example. It's really enlightening, I think.
Yes, thank you. So, uh, in the shadow of that, definitely from your experience, for sure, when do you think it's the right time to change a process itself?
Hmm. Um, when's the right time? Ah, that's a difficult one. I don't think I don't think it pops up one fine morning, waiting for you on your desk saying you need to change it. It's See, there are big changes around the world, obviously. The COVID, the current mishap that's going in between Russia and Ukraine. These are big changes, and they happen
Yeah.
often suddenly. But then there are lots of more small reasons or small changes that creep in without you even realizing. And so when to change it, I guess when it starts, when you have a control over your process but it still stops giving you the desired outcome, or when the system, those processes they support, they need to evolve themselves because the times are changing. Yeah. uh, Again, one of the famous examples of I love cars. Let's start there. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
cars. I hate driving, but I love cars. Um, yeah, I know it's a bit of a paradox, but so I have done a lot of reading on the history of automobile, and one of my favorites is about Henry Ford. Right,
Yeah.
he
Definitely.
revolutionized the automobile sector, and interestingly, he came from a very meager background. He was a son of a farmer. He never really he wasn't the best in terms of technology. He wasn't the best engineer. He didn't get the best of education. He got decent education, but then he revolutionized the industry. And till about the early 1900s, the late 1800s, Ford was the top revenue earner in its sector. It was leading the industry. But in about the early 1900s, I think that the times had changed a little bit, because Ford was looking for a very utilitarian vehicle. He focused on better engine power, better utility, making sure that you got a car which was able to drive, right? And his famous saying that any customer can get any car painted in any color as long as it's black. I don't know how
Yeah.
many of you recall it, but that's a famous saying.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. It's
it it
famous. Yes.
it almost, yeah, is like he got arrogant at some point because of his infallible success that
Yeah.
preceded it, and he overlooked the fact that the times were changing. And in less than a decade, Chevrolet takes over the
Yeah.
automobile sector. They were the leader suddenly, and even after all the changes that Ford made to, he literally shut down a plant for 5 months. He changed a lot. He brought in some different vehicles and designs, but by then it was too late. Chevy had become the leader. Ford had fallen behind on third, and in fact, they made kind of a similar mistake when they came to India. When I don't remember when, but in India, Ford and Hyundai, they both entered the market at the same time, and Ford focused on building cars which had better horsepower, better engine stability, and robustness, because
Yeah.
that's what Americans prefer, by the way. At least back then, they preferred that.
Yeah.
Whereas the Hyundai, I think they understood the Indian culture and mentality better. They understood that perhaps the Indian culture was more around fuel efficiency, right, and utility. So if you look at, I don't know about rest of the world, but in India, most of the Hyundai vehicles, they are loved by the middle and upper middle class because it's value for money, it's fuel efficient, it has all the elements that you can think of, and it's really great customer service. Now, I don't say customer service wasn't there, but then Ford made the mistake of saying whatever worked earlier will work as well now.
Yeah.
So um I think, so to answer your question, Khalid, what's important is to keep your eyes and ears open. At times you will not realize something all of a sudden, but if you just keep your eyes and ears open over the period of time, you will start realizing, feeling the pulse of what's happening. And as a leader, one of the important jobs that you have is not just creating a system that works today, but trying to evolve it and adapt it to the changing times and create a system that works for tomorrow. In fact, one of the famous quotes that I had read somewhere was, it goes to something to the effect of, um, the 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 main job of a leader is to be not to be indispensable in a day-to-day activity. They can leave it along for the rest of the guys, and the the main job of a leader is to be indispensable when it comes to their thought leadership, and that's their main purpose, to think about when the times are changing and when the process needs to adapt, or when the system needs to adapt, because the process in itself ignores the past and the future. I told you about that, and the process
Yeah.
focus on present. But for the processes to change, you first need to have a sort of a domino effect coming from the top down, saying the system needs to adapt and evolve. And that's the job of a leader, to make sure that with the changing times, with the changing scenarios, you are trying to bulk up for what's going around to happen in the next couple of years. Amazon, I mean, take that example. When Amazon rose its first, I think 50 millions, if I remember. I don't remember the exact number. When the first time they tried to put together money, um Bezos, Jeff Bezos, he had to go around so many investors, and most of the investors, they asked, what is an internet? Right back in those days, what is the internet?
Yeah.
It's the vision that this guy had to think about what could happen. And make no mistake, Amazon could have failed as well, because the dot
Yeah.
com bubble, it took away many of the organizations, so it could have
True.
failed as well, but it survived. Let's just say, it could have been any organization, let's just say, for the sake of conversation. um, but the vision that this guy had, and the thought process he put in, to say, I will explain to 100 people if it required to explain what internet is, because I believe that it's what is going to happen in the coming days, and I'm going to build a system for that time. So when does the system need to change? When does the process need to change? I guess when the times are changing, and the only way to do it, the only way to understand that indeed the times are changing, is keep your eyes and ears open. You cannot be uh, Henry Ford. Let's take that example.
Yes,
Great,
I
great,
I think
great answer.
I like how you connected it, Arpan, which is when is the best time to change the process? When the outputs, the desired output, is not there. There is something, a breach that we have to admit in the process itself, that we need to have a revamp inside it. And the rigid mind inside the business will not serve you, will not help you at all. That because simply if you keep doing what you're doing, you will keep getting what you're getting. So you have to be flexible. If the process is not working at all, just or on a way, you have to be flexible to understand, as you said, what are the gaps and how you can control it and how you can make it work based on the people's and based on the feedback or based on the desired outputs. Definitely.
You touched upon a
Thank
very
you.
interesting word, by the way, Khalid. You said feedback, and there is often this mentality that I've. You will all notice that feedback is often associated in people's mind as something negative. Someone
Yeah.
comes up, I have feedback for you. They often think it's negative, and it can be, but the whole purpose of a feedback, if you really take away all the emotions from it, important, by the way, huh? If you have to take away all the emotions, if you take away all the emotions from a feedback is just feedback. It's not positive or negative. It's something that, if I were to give you a feedback, it's something that I noticed that you did, which could have been done differently. And the
Exactly.
different in your mind could sound like, because I do it this way, anything which is different than this is wrong.
It was
And
wrong.
hence
Yeah.
that person is being critical on me.
Yeah.
That's not right. That's not right, because if you're not open to that feedback, the moment you see, people, they don't like to be told that they are wrong. And it's human nature, right? So um, you're right, you're absolutely right, 100% agree with you, Khalid. Feedback, right? How do you take feedback from the people who give you feedback? How you create a culture that promotes feedback?
100%.
How do you take feedback from your customers, from your consumer, from
Yeah.
your competitors? From your competitors, it's important.
Yes.
Maybe they're not telling you everything that they should be, but you should be hearing what they're not saying. That's also important.
100%.
Definitely,
Thank you.
definitely, you should accept that that you may be wrong, and you take this feedback, and it may be constructive, and maybe change your whole perspective about something, or lead you to something great. So definitely, I agree with you.
Yes. Thank you so much, Arpan. I think, as we said, always the time is flying. Now,
Yeah.
we have, if you allow me, let's take the last question just to
Yes,
close this.
please.
I think our friend Ghada Salam, she's asking, can we change the whole process immediately or gradually?
Okay. uh I think I did touch upon this, but let me again
Yeah.
ask you this
Yeah,
instead, Gada Salam. Uh, let's assume that you don't eat spicy food, right? You don't eat spicy food. Let's assume that. I'm taking a guess, okay? So don't shoot me for this. But let's assume you don't, but you want to try Mexican or you want to try the Indian cuisine. You want to build a taste for it. Um, if you were to go if you were to come to India and said, give me the spiciest dish, and I gave you in our country, there's a famous chili called ghost chili. It's one of the spiciest chilies in the world. Okay,
well,
it's really crazy. Um, if I were to give you that, can you really eat it or survive with that? Right? You cannot. You would say next time someone gave you a dish like that, you would just spit on it. I don't want it
avoid. Yeah.
because you have introduced something very very fast, right? And instead, if you were to slowly build up an appetite for it, right, over a period of time you will start liking it. There is a taste to it. Same with Chinese. I Younger days, uh, in India, uh, the Chinese cuisine is, how to put this? I don't want to use the word adulterated, but it's very different. The real Chinese cuisine is often slightly bland, right? So it doesn't come with a lot of spices, more about herbs, right? Whereas in India, Chinese is also spicy. So if I were when I started eating Chinese in my early days, and I come from the northeastern part of the country where Chinese is quite famous, but a different kind of Chinese. There's a word for it. It's called Tengra Chinese, and I like that. But the first time I went to this authentic Chinese restaurant in Bangalore, and I was out with my colleagues, office colleagues. I just gotten a job, and there was this office outing, and they took us to this nice posh Chinese restaurant, and there was a buffet. And I went from one end of the buffet to the extreme other end, not finding what I want to eat because I didn't like anything. For me, it was a shock. It was a shock that someone introduced such a big change in the whole definition of Chinese cuisine for me. I couldn't accept it. And so to answer your question, Gada, fast is not the way to go. You have to do it gradually. You have to do it slowly, step by step, and then your body gets used to it, and then your mind gets used to it. It becomes habit. And when you're making a change, your conscious mind, it tries to put every effort to deny it. Every day, if you want to go for a run, if you're not a runner, after some time your body will start denying it and you'll find reasons to not go for that run. But if you were to do it slowly and steadily, just a little bit extra every day. If you don't want to run a marathon, I run marathons. When I started running marathons, I didn't start with 25 kilometers on day one. I started with half a kilometer. I couldn't do
Yeah.
one freaking circle of my entire apartment. But you start to do it slowly and gradually, your body gets used to that little extra, and over a period of time your body gets used to the whole process. And that's very true for every single thing. Whether it's an organization, it's a process or a system, you start to introduce it slowly enough, people get used to it. And people are very very important in a system. If you were to think about a machine, right, if you took a car which drove up to a 120 kilometers per hour speed, it can only go to 120 kilometers. It cannot do 121, it cannot do 121, because that's how it's
Yes.
been built. But when it comes to people, you don't have those breaks.
Limits.
Yeah, you don't have those limits, so you have to be careful. You have to be careful, like a baby, teaching them one single word every day as they grow up, and over a period of time they'll surprise you with the amount of big sentences that they throw at you. My 2.5 years, she makes me crazy by with her mumbles of late, and I don't think she learned it on one day, right? It just took her 2.5 years. So gradually, please, absolutely gradually.
Great,
Thank you
great,
so
great.
much. Thank you, Arpan, for your great presence today and the great values and the amazing stories, inspiring stories with these great examples. Definitely, it was, as we mentioned at the beginning, it's a knowledge that you will never find the
Mm,
books. Pleasure have
yes.
you today. And
Yes, it's a big pleasure. Yeah, and exactly as Ahmed said, a lot of values we got from you, and thanks, of course, for the active participation from our lovely audience. Also, thank you so much today for this great episode.
Thank you so
definitely,
much.
thank you.
Thanks everyone. It was lovely
Thank you.
being here.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much. Have
Thank
a
you so
great
much.
day. Thank
Thank
you.
you.